Hello, I am honored to be here this afternoon. Thank you very much to all of those that have made possible me being here. As Joy said, I come from Colombia. I am a journalist. I've been a journalist and a book editor all my life, and now I head a UNESCO Center for the Promotion of Books and Reading in Latin America and the Caribbean. What am I going to talk to you about today? The general subject is public libraries in Latin America. And you might ask, what does this theme exactly have to do with access to information? I think the first question that I would like to address is a very simple one. What is being informed? What is it to be an informed person? I would like to propose an answer to that, which is being informed is knowing what your contrarian thinks. Being informed is knowing what the person who is in opposition to your thoughts, who is on the other side of the spectrum, perhaps ideological side of the spectrum, thinks. If that is so, when we think of social media works with likes, an algorithm detects exactly what you like and shows you the information you like, the information that is closest to the way you think. And therefore, it does exactly the opposite of what an informed person should be. It does exactly the opposite to help you be informed. So, of course, I don't think we get informed by social media. On the contrary, because I would never put a like on a neo-Nazi gathering. It means I will never know, probably, when neo-Nazis or where neo-Nazis meet. The truth is, we live these days in a tsunami of data. I think it's been said many times today. From a scarcity of information, we have come now to live in a tsunami of data. What do we do with all that content? Is access to all that content really leading us to be informed? There is a big misconception, or quite a few, about public libraries. Not only among us, probably among you and among me, but also among certainly Latin American politicians. And that is what I'm going to talk to you about that today. Why do we need libraries when we have so much information? Why do we need libraries if the 23 million books that are held in the public library in Washington, in the Library of Congress, are equivalent to 1/45 of the information that Facebook manages today, every day? These figures are really overwhelming. Today we produce, the last 2 years we've produced more data than in the last, in all of recorded history of humanity. That is, that data comes from Michael Bashgar's latest book. So I am here to propose that in that tsunami of data, a library, a public library, is the most important and powerful curator of content. The problem today is not so much about access to information, but about the mediation between content and the reader. And I believe this is what Latin American libraries are doing right now. So even though we have at the tip of our fingers all the content, all the books, or so many more books than we could read in a lifespan, in our lifetime, libraries are not simply deposits for preserving books. That otherwise they would not be of any sense, they would not have any importance today, they would not have any meaning. Libraries are powerful public curators of content. There are also many other misconceptions, I think, about what a library is and what a library can do. I think many also, again, would like to address politicians and that think reading is a very private matter. Reading is cultivating the soul. Reading means reading classics. Reading is a solitary activity that is done sometimes in libraries. And the state has really nothing to say or do. And I think, in a way, they're right. But I think that reading, from a political point of view, is not about reading the classics, is not about the cultivation of the spirit. It's not about the joy or the happiness that reading can bring to an individual. Reading, from a public policy and a political point of view, is about having citizens understand, fully understand what they read. It is not about literacy, but it is not about reading the classics either. Reading is a human right, but it is also the right that enables us to exercise all other human rights. If we cannot read a political program, we cannot vote accordingly. If we cannot read about our rights, we cannot read about what we need from the government, we cannot access those, whatever the government has to offer us and should offer us. So reading is about comprehending. It is not about the joy of reading Dostoevsky, and this is why it matters in public policy. And this is why libraries, our public libraries especially, are so important in our region. There is another misconception that politicians and many of us have as well about what libraries are or are not for, public libraries especially. They think that libraries cater for individuals and not for communities. Well, that is certainly not true, and I would like to put some examples of projects that are now going on in Latin America so as to illuminate what libraries can do for communities. In San Juan de la Laguna, in Guatemala, the librarian there, it's a tiny, tiny small town by a wonderful lake in Guatemala. What does she do? She is teaching advertising and helping peasants in the area design advertisement pieces for their produce. She's teaching them accounting. She is teaching them how to exhibit their products. And in the library, they actually every Saturday sell their produce. This is innovative services being led by libraries, and this is happening in projects like this one are happening all over Latin America. In the World Economic Forum, there were some figures which actually surprised me very much, and I don't know if you know them, but I find them very striking. Only 4% of jobs in the world are held by big corporations. Between 87 and 91% of new jobs are held by small and medium enterprises. So this really is about entrepreneurship. So I think that many people might think that public libraries only help to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 4, education. Well, that is not true. I think now we are talking about Sustainable Development Goal number 1, end poverty, and perhaps number 8 or number 10, to create jobs. So you can see, I think, for example, in Belo Horizonte in Brazil, public libraries, what is doing a project with young, rebellious adolescents who have been marginalized by society, who have perhaps spent time in youth jails. They're helping them to learn how to make CVs. They're preparing them for interviews. They're giving them context. They're training them for future jobs, for possible jobs. So certainly a library is not only about reading. Of course, reading is part of the process, but there is always something else at the end, which is the welfare of individuals and of communities. In Brasilia, one of the projects I am endeared to, I like, a public library is working with young blind children in order for them to produce their own tools that will help them at school, in order for them to find and design and create the tools that will help them learn more. In Santiago de Chile, what is the public library doing? I don't know if you know, but there is a huge migration of Haitians into Santiago de Chile. Chile has been a very conservative and closed country, and this is one of the first big immigrations that they are facing now. It is in public libraries where the Haitians are learning Spanish. And it is voluntaries from the community, Chilean people, who are teaching them. And it's also Haitians who have been there longer, who are coming to welcome, to give context, and to explain what it is to live in Santiago de Chile to the new arrivals. This is also happening with Syrian refugees in public libraries in the outskirts of Lisbon. So please think about all the things that are happening, and that reading happens too, of course. You access information and you read, but it is so, so much more. I think governments in Latin America haven't all, some have, fully realized what a tremendous asset a public library is. If you think that from all the infrastructures that the state has, it is the most flexible, the most malleable. A police station is a police station. A notary is a notary. A public library, in its freedom, is it is so open to innovation. It is so open to building communities. And why? Because books and knowledge are really, if they are at the heart of a library, of course it makes it a place of freedom and a tremendously powerful place. In Colombia, there is a tendency in public libraries, which is to build small orchards. And I am talking about libraries that are in rural areas. And these small orchards with homegrown plants, medicinal plants, are taken care of by the community, by the young people in the community. And then they go inside the library and finish a research project into what the knowledge in medicinal plants of their ancestors were. So we are recovering memory, and memory is a delicate word in Colombia. Memory has been broken by war. So such a simple, small thing, you might find it's a very small project and a very not so meaningful project, but it is. It is very powerful. It creates bonds between generations, and it makes the young people realize, which is always very difficult, if you live in Paris or if you live in Islamabad, respect their elders and build bonds with the previous generations. So I respect these projects as well. Talking about gender equality, there's also another project I liked in the city of Reinaco in the southern, in Chile. The community got together to try and make a campaign to stop teen pregnancy. The year after they started their campaign, teen pregnancy figures fell in town. Training, ideas, communities getting together, proposing civil action. I think that is a tremendously, tremendously powerful thing for a library to do, and that is what they're doing. In Latin America, there are 51,000 libraries right now. There are 1.8 million around the world. But we have 152 million users of those libraries. Of course, many of them are not in the best state. I'm not going to kid you. The infrastructure is not always is not always good. Books are not always the latest books that you can find. While it is a very asymmetrical continent, so you have countries like Mexico where there are 7,400 public libraries, and you have countries like El Salvador, which of course is smaller, but it has only 33 public libraries. So yes, there's a huge asymmetry in the nation. But still, I think that in the small ones, in the big ones, in the developed countries, in the less developed countries, libraries are undergoing right now a very exciting moment. I was reading 2 days ago a UNESCO document of the first meeting to discuss what public libraries in Latin America should do. And this meeting took place in 1951, only 6 years after the end of the Second World War. I found this really incredible. It is an extraordinary set of documents, and of course at that time, being in a library was about reading. But you cannot imagine what they were discussing, how difficult it was to have access to books, to have access to information about what was being published in the continent, in the subcontinent, in other countries or in their own country. So definitely we have come a long, 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 long way. I would like to end this talk with what I find one of the most extraordinary projects that are being done in Latin America now, and it is in my country, in Colombia. As you know, the peace process finished with the signature of the peace agreement between President Juan Manuel Santos and the FARC guerrilla last year. And the next step was for the guerrilla ex-combatants to gather in 24 places in the country, places that are in rural areas, actually quite difficult access. The first thing the Colombian government had in those areas were mobile libraries. They were bought here in France from Bibliothèques Sans Frontières. They cost $2 million. The government chose the 20 best librarians of Colombia to go and live in those areas and cater for them. Those mobile libraries have 380 books each. They have access to internet. They have 25 iPads. They have books for children and also books for the communities that live very near the area where the FARC is. Even Jesus Santrich, one of the head of the ex-directorate of the FARC, praised directly the government. I think it's just about the only time he praised directly the government for what had been achieved with the mobile libraries. So I am going to end this brief 10 minutes telling you a story that happened to me 17 years ago as a journalist, and which I have actually never forgotten. When I was the head of a news magazine, a weekly news magazine, during the FARC and government talks in the Pastrana administration, once we took a plane, journalists, heads of media took a plane and to talk to the directorate. We met in the middle of the jungle, in a hut, in a very rudimentary hut. It was a long table, and the guerrillas were at one side of the table, and we journalists were at the other. In front of me, I recognized Comandante Jairo. He was known for his cruelty, and particularly because he was probably the head of the kidnapping operations and going on in the country at that time. What he did was he put his automatic machine weapon on the table with the eye of the barrel facing my belly. I had a pen in my hand, and of course I was nervous. And quite stupidly, I think, or foolishly, I wagged the pen in front of him and said to him, "This one writes better." And he answered swiftly with a stare, "Oh no, it does not write better. It has better spelling, which is an entirely different matter." Of course, I didn't know what to answer. I have never forgotten it. And today, I think there is so much intelligence in that mind, such vivacious intelligence to be able to have such a quick answer. But I also think there is so much exclusion and so much pain encapsulated in that phrase. So now that I have been working with libraries, public libraries all over the continent, now that today we have 1,700 libraries in rural areas in Colombia only, I think how this Comandante Jairo's life could have been changed if he had had access to a library, a public library, as a child, as a youth. I dare say, I think he would have been the librarian. Thank you very much.